Hi, Andre here from Peak Motorcycles. We're still in lockdown, so unfortunately there's another video for you. This one I'm actually going to find out how I can put my BMW Nav 6 and install it onto the Honda CRF300 Rally. Now normally I wouldn't bother doing a video for this because frankly anybody can bolt on a bracket onto a bracket that's already there and you're kind of done. I think the tricky bit is sometimes working out where to put the wiring. What I was delighted to find on the Honda CRF300 Rally is a feature that they had on the outgoing 250 as well, which is that underneath here, Honda have put an accessory connector that is switched already through the ignition. So all I should have to do is to wire the sat-nav from here, run the wires down, put a connector on the other end, which I have, and then just plug it in. So I don't need to worry about finding a switched loop from the fuse board or putting in a new fuse. So it should be fairly straightforward. I've got some RAM ball mounts that I'm going to use to mount onto the GPS bracket, and I'm going to try and get the unit about there so I can angle it up so I can see it just above the dashboard. I'll try and skip through the bits where I'm just assembling pieces, but I hope it all makes sense. Thanks a lot. The reason why I have a BMW Navigator 6 is because I use it on my 1250 GS. I also use it on my CB 1000R, and I'm going to use it on this bike, and I'm going to do that using these Zumo 660 brackets, and that will fit directly on there. Now to fit it to the bike itself, I'm going to use a RAM mount to go onto the ball mount, and then I've got a short arm, and then I put a ball mount on the back of the GPS unit, and that's kind of it. Then I'm just going to go up, fit it to the bike, make sure it's in the right place, and then I have the wiring to deal with. So for that, I have the special Honda connector, which I'm going to put on the end of these wires. Garmin actually give you enough wires to actually run all the way to the battery, which is great if that's what you need to do. In this case, when all I really need is about a couple of feet, I think I'm probably going to try and keep the wiring harness intact, simply because they've got the fuse at the end, and they've got all these other wires for other connections, which I don't know if I'm going to use them now, but I might need them on a bike in the future. So I just need to find a way on the CRF300L to hide those wires away. First up is fitting the RAM mount to the back of the Garmin unit. So this is a RAM B347U. It's a square mount that looks a lot like that. Here we go. So the sequence these goes on. It's a long screw that goes through into the hole, and then onto the back of that you put one of these small spacers. And actually looking at that, that's kind of a nice fitting because these have actually got a rubber shock mount in those holes. So what I'm actually going to do is, rather than try and push it through in one go, I'm just going to push these directly in to the spacers. So that's great to give it a shock mount. For those that watched my video the other day, you would have seen that the GoPro that I had mounted on that bar was vibrating around all over the place. So while I think the GPS unit is fairly resistant to it, I also think that having anything that has a shock mount in it is probably going to be helpful. They don't need to go massively tight, just secure to the bracket is fine. They are nylock nuts on the back, so they're not going to go anywhere. Okay, so that's all of that bracket assembled. That bit was easy. The next thing I'm going to use is this. It's a RAM B201UA, and it's just a double-ended 1-inch ball arm. One end goes on here, and the other end will go on the bracket that fits to the bike. So the last piece I'm using is a RAM B408751U, and this is a bracket that will just fit through onto that top rail on the bike. Those pieces fit together, a nut goes on the back end, a couple of bolts that go through, and then these three pieces fit together. So I'm now going to walk back up to the bike, find a convenient place to fit this, and put it all together. To get it where I think I need it to be, I think I actually almost need to have the ball right on the top of there, so I can actually just put that in there and then actually use that either down or even at an angle to put the sat-nav on the front of it. So I'm thinking somewhere pretty much central, pointing almost upwards or maybe even slightly forwards. All I want to do is just make sure I'm clear of the top of the screen there. So the top of this bracket needs to be pretty much level with it, so somewhere about there. So I'll go and fit that. The two sets of fittings for the bars that come with the RAM mount. Some are marked 75, the others are marked 90. It's the 90 ones that actually fit the bar best. There is a little bit of give in them, so there's enough space underneath there to put the rubber strip. I'm going to fit that now. That's it, that's the bracket on. So that is still a little bit high up because the top of the bracket is actually just sticking up above the top of the screen. So I think I need to rotate this round a little bit to be able to put the bracket in there correctly. So when the sat nav goes on there, it just literally just clicks in like that. And actually, that's not a terrible place for it to be. Just adjust that a little bit. So it's definitely behind the windscreen. It's right in the eye line for riding. So yeah, I think that will be ideal. So this next bit is quite difficult to actually get the camera onto. This bit here is a dust cap that's on the end of the accessory connector. Now I thought I could just take out 3 bolts and take this whole panel off, but actually there's a lot of push rivets as well holding it in place. So instead of doing that, I actually just popped a screwdriver inside, and I was able to get a screwdriver under the back end of it and actually just knock the dust cap off. Simple as that. So yeah, it came away fairly easily. I certainly suggest getting some light in there and having a look at it. This is the connector as it comes to go onto the end of the cable. It's exactly the same as the blanking plug that came off. Unfortunately, the blanking plug doesn't have the electrical contacts, and it has the green plugs to keep out the dust instead of the ones that go onto the wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of my Garmin cable. It is actually just a crimp connector on the end of here, so these will just crimp round, but I am going to solder them as well. And the important thing to remember with all these things is to put the plugs on your wires before you solder and crimp them. It's the sort of thing you always remember just after you've done it, by which time it's too late. I'm just going to put a dot of solder on that just to make sure that it never works loose. With all the vibrations on the bike, you never know. It's better. Okay, so if you can see that in there, that is one side done. Now I'm going to go and do the red side. Both of the metal contacts are identical. This looks kind of fiddly. It is, but I'm sure that not everyone's got sausage fingers like me. There we go, that's it. So the very last thing, just another dot of solder. There we go. Job done. So that's my wiring done. The next thing to do is to push it into the connector itself. The way around these need to go is that as you're looking at it this way up, exactly like that, the one on the left here should be the positive, that should be the red, and the one on the right should be the black. And the way these go in is they just push in. I don't know if you can see on here, but there is like a little sort of leaf thing underneath, which actually, in order to get it out again afterwards, I think they actually go in that way up. Again, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there is a very slight little notch on the top of there, and so when if you ever wanted to release it, you'd put a little screwdriver into the top of there and the contact should come out. Red one, that side up, pushing into the hole like that, and it should just click like that when it's in, and then you just ease this rubber plug into the hole. It's going to do the same with the black one, again into there, and it will just click like that when it's in place. Job done. So I'm just going to push my plugs up. I'm going to get those into the holes. A small screwdriver just to push that so it's firmly seated in the holes, and that'll just stop any water ingress. If you think about where it is on the bike, it is in quite an exposed spot. Now for this Garmin wire, the positive is significantly thicker, so I'm just going to, I think that's good enough. Right then, so I'm going to go back up to the bike, I'm going to plug that in, put the Garmin on the other end, just make sure that the power is coming through correctly, and if it is, then I need to work out what to do with this massive wiring loom and find a place to hide it on the bike. I'll mess around with the final positioning later. I just want to feed the multitude of cables in and around the back. So I think this needs to route down here. So you know what, I might bring it down this side. So windscreen's going to come off. Yeah, so that kind of matches up, because on this side we've got the wiring for the dash, and then on this side I'm just going to put a tie wrap, I think, just around that, just to hold that in that location. Well, that's routing, so it's come out from the back of there, around the back, down there. I've just pushed it underneath here, managed to just get it past that bolt that I took out. And then this end, I think, is going to come underneath, tie wrap up against there, just the same, so like those other cables, but just on this side. And then everything else seems to route, maybe even sort of to come in and round the back of there would be the way it needs to go. I don't know if you can see in there, but I've got the cable now coming out from here. I'm going to tie wrap it underneath here, and then bring the rest of it round inside and connect it onto the end. Before I put all of that in, the first thing I'm going to do is actually just connect it up and make sure it's working. So that just clips onto the accessory connector like that. And start the bike up. Put my GPS unit on, and there we go. I have the power icon showing that has power. If I turn the bike off, that goes off. External power has been lost, so that's perfect. So that is now wired in and working with the bike electrics. So I'm pretty much done. All I really need to do now is tie wrap the cables, put the screen back on, put all the bolts back in, and I think I'm all set. So that is pretty much it. Everything is in, properly secured away. The wires are all out of the way. All I've got to do now is just go around and cut off all the loose ends of the tie wraps. Yeah, just checking where the wires go, that nothing is catching on the steering, and that all looks good. So last thing to do is to put the screen on. And there we go, we're all finished. That's my video for how to fit a Garmin sat-nav bracket plumbed into the accessory socket on a Honda CRF300 Rally. It's exactly the same if you're putting a phone charger or a USB charger or anything else and using that same socket that's in there. The only thing that might be difficult is finding the part for the connector that goes onto it. I think they'd be between about £5 or £6. I hope this has been useful. If it has, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.